Good evening. Welcome to the very first Grafton Planning Board meeting of the year 2020. We should be seeing things clearly all year, correct?
That's right.
First item on our agenda, well, before I get to any items on the agenda, I would like to make a note that Joe Layden, who up through last Friday was our town planner, is now our guest. He is the assistant, as of today, the assistant town administrator in the town of Littleton. And the town of Littleton has graciously allowed Joe to attend tonight's meeting as our guest to help wrap up some of the things Joe had been working on as our planner.
Thank you.
And Bill Scanlon here is our newly hired interim town planner. That Bill is filling in, taking Joe's place part-time until such time as we are able to hire a full-time town planner to replace Joe. So welcome, Bill.
Thank you.
And
Happy to be here.
Thank you, Joe, for everything you've done for us over the years. We will miss you, guaranteed that. But anyway, and we may, at the appropriate time in the agenda, we may have an update on the status of the process of hiring a new town planner. But for now, let me dive right into the agenda. Our first agenda item is public input. If we have anyone from the public who has a matter that they wouldn't wish to bring to the board's attention that's not currently on the agenda or not related to something that's already on the agenda, now is the time to speak. And do I have anybody who wishes to speak on something that's not on the agenda?
Sitaraman Ganesan, 28 Seaver Farm Lane, South Grafton, Mass. As you all know, our town is growing. So many subdivisions got permits, and the population is growing. As you all know, I don't know if you guys encountered this personally, but when you go towards Grafton High School, so many cars got piled up. It's crowding basically during the school hours. I talked to Representative Dave Meridian. He was so nice. He brought a mass dot. We had a meeting and we talked about expanding the road a little bit. This little room in front of the police station, in between walkway and the road, there's some space, some dirt in there, and it's state property basically. He's considering, he's trying he's using all his options to help the town, which is good. We can park, if that goes through, then we can park 20 more cars to make a left turn into the school, into the high school and into the middle school. But still, only one car can enter the school at a time. Coming from north or going south to the school, only one car can enter at a time. We have to do something about this. We are growing. As a planning board, I thought I should come before you all and make a request. It'll help everybody. People. There could be a doctor trying to drop off the child and try to head to a surgery. So many things. So we have to think about everybody. We cannot keep giving. It's good to bring in more subdivisions to Grafton. I know even state is giving incentive. We are a special state. We are a special town. I read somewhere if we bring in a single family home, the state gives $3,000 to our town. I don't know. I read some. I have that on my iPhone. I can. 1 second. Yeah, it is R40, smart growth zoning and housing production.
Yes,
Grafton
you're
is,
talking about chapter 40R and 40S.
yeah, chapter
yes.
40. So, this is what it says. Every new home created, we get $3,000 from the state. I don't know. I could be wrong. Whatever I read, I'm just saying here. So I mean, we have to do something about this. That's my only, and I give some handouts to. I mean, whatever I read on the internet, I just copied and give it to you all regarding marijuana use. It's very dangerous. Not many people know. You can, I can go to my primary care, or I can go to my doctor and get a medical card, and I can get marijuana for weeks. That person can misuse it. I can store it for a month. Person can misuse it. They can sell it to somebody else. How we are going to regulate all these? I mean, just I'm thinking out loud, right? And how the police officer are going to detect this? Like, if somebody consume and drive, how we are going to what? I mean, the reports that I read, you have to do a blood test to see how much they consume. I mean, the police officer, they are not going to do the blood test. Who's going to do the blood test right away to see how much a person is consuming? I'm thinking out loud for everybody. I don't want accidents. I don't want people to, consume this and drive and cause an accident. I'm thinking out loud for everybody. Help us. Whatever you can do with your powers, help the town.
Yeah, I know. With all the concerns you've just shared with us, we've heard them in one form or another, more than once in the past. Some of the issues the state is still kind of trying to grapple with, the issue of traffic at the high school. Those of us who were on this board when the new high school was being planned raised concerns about traffic, and there were some steps were taken to address it. If Representative Meridian is able to use his influence to maybe shake something more loose, I'm sure many people will appreciate that. So,
That's
yes,
right.
thank you for sharing your concerns with us, certainly.
One last point I would like to make. I mean, maybe we should have two entrances to the school. Maybe, we should use the Brigham Hill Road to see if we can make an entrance and exit. Rotnick Road we can make use of that road. These are all the options that we have on the table. Maybe, those are all town. I mean, town takes care of those roads, Rodnick Road and Brigham Hill Road. We can do something. I mean, we can expand a little bit more. Two entrance to this one. One from the backside, one from Providence Road. I'm here. We have to do something about this. Our town is growing. We have to do something about this.
So is the traffic concern on your end, is it for the morning, the afternoon, or both?
It's about for 20 minutes,
Like,
from...
is it more of
Morning.
a issue morning?
Morning.
Okay.
Yeah, it's more of a problem for people entering the high school in the morning than it is for exiting. I mean, there are traffic problems on the exit related to the afternoon traffic as well, but that's different.
Is it something that a police officer for a short while
He's out there.
would be able to help, or maybe I don't
Yeah,
go
they
there
are
at
out
that
there,
time.
Bob.
There's an officer who help when the kids leave the school, like,
we need-
In the
so nice. I
afternoon.
mean, he
In the
controls
afternoon.
yeah.
I'm talking about in the morning
I
now.
don't think there's anybody in the morning.
Yeah, well,
Inside the school, the principal and they're there.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And kudos to all the staff, school staff. They all help Timothy, Mr. Timothy.
but in
High school
terms of the
principal,
traffic,
they all stand in the cold weather. They all stand and help everybody.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, I feel for them. I mean, maybe should think about, doing something. I don't know. Whatever I had in my mind, I just, got it out here.
It's probably not a bad idea to sort of keep, keep this, the issue alive, make sure that, all the appropriate parties, it has something to do with the state and what the state can do on that road. It has something to do with our police force and their awareness of the issues, the school administration and their, what they're able to do. It's as I'm sure you've already pretty much said and recognized, it's not an easy problem to solve.
Exactly.
We have some difficult traffic spots in town, and hopefully we can find solutions over time to more of those. I fully understand.
Well, north I don't know how to solve, but coming from north, but south, maybe we can use Rodnick Road, divert some traffic that way,
Which road?
behind
Rodnick,
Rodnick. There's a road
it's just after Millbury.
just after Milford Road on the left. There's a small road. I don't know whether you noticed.
Rodnick it's kind of a small, narrow,
Small road.
not very well improved street that
And it connects
comes
to
off of
Brigham.
Providence Road and comes around onto Brigham Hill Road.
Yeah, and if we divert some
Hard to
traffic
see
that
it.
way to municipal center and then connect municipal center and the school, something. I don't know. I thought planning board. I thought it's planning board. Okay, maybe they have more powers. I don't know.
There's I don't know how much we as a board can do, but I do recall that the traffic on the municipal center side and school side are kept separate, and there were good reasons for that at the time.
Part of it is geography. Different levels couldn't get everything they needed to get onto the available land if they had to take as much as it would take to make roads. But there used to be a connection from out front here down to there, but they needed that land flat, and so
Yeah.
the decisions were made by, we did the best we could.
Yes, I think we were hoping that more could be done to take care of the traffic situation there, but
Yeah, and the state told us no, actually.
Thank you.
yeah. Thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts with us. That's it's always good to have to see someone share their thoughts and concerns and see that someone else out there recognizes some problems. And so I welcome your participation and thank you again.
Thank you.
Any other public input? I see Mr. McInerney's hand up.
Hi, thank you. Mr. Chairman, Tim McInerney, Town Administrator. Joe's last meeting, actually, he probably already had his last meeting, but he's here tonight, and I just wanted to publicly recognize Joe and thank Joe for getting this board to a place that's, really, I think, an upper echelon of a board for the surrounding communities comparatively. And I think a lot of that's Joe, a lot of it's you all, but a lot of it I think is Joe. So I wanted to thank him and tell him he's been a great asset, and I hope to replace him in kind quickly. Bill is here for you too, for a supporting role to help transition, to keep, as I say to Joe, to keep the balls in the air and keep them from falling. Bill will have the role that Joe has without all of the extraneous material that I give Joe, or I've given Joe, because I'm not going to burden Bill with that, but he's a resource for you. Ginny Kramer will be a resource to him, just like she was to Joe. But I just want the board to be assured that you're in good hands, you were in great hands, and we will try to get you another great pair of hands soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I've been here for all of our planners. And I think,
And all the TAs too. And all the TAs.
and all the TAs. Joe, I think, has done, several of our planners were very good. But I think Joe has done more both for us and for all of the roles that you've given him. We see dialogue out on social media about why isn't the town doing anything? And then somebody puts up a list about this long, and most of it is stuff that he's working on. And having some success with.
we're gonna continue on that path, so thank you, Joe, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, Thank you,
Thank you.
Tim. All right, any other public input? Then the next item on our agenda would be action item 2A, the draft decision on the request for site plan approval at 155 Main Street. We all have the draft decision in front of us. It's been posted on the website for, since, what, Thursday or Friday last week?
Yes.
And I had taken the time to review Joe's initial draft and submitted some suggested edits, all of which I believe have been incorporated into what we see in front of us.
Correct. The only thing I sort of noticed and I need to check on it, mainly because I lived down this street 20 years ago, on Main Street. I don't think I have the zip code right. I think, I'm trying to remember.
That's 01560, yes.
Exactly.
And I didn't catch that. That's one of the details I didn't think to look for.
Oh, yeah.
It just hit me now. I'm like, I don't think that's the right zip code.
Nope, it is not.
Okay.
So we have one change to be made in the heading there, and I think that's the only place it is. You can double check that. If anybody has any other questions or comments about this?
I'll move to approve the draft as we have it, with the one correction.
Second.
So that would be a motion to make the findings as drafted, to grant the waivers, the requested waivers, and to grant the site plan approval with the conditions all as drafted with the one correction noted.
Or what I said, which is similar.
Just to make sure that we've got,
I,
got everything covered, yes. The motion is to approve it, and that's what approval means. Moved and seconded, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Declare the motion carried unanimously. And this will be put out in the appropriate time and place.
The only thing that I would recommend is for the board to vote to authorize the interim town planner to sign the decision.
so moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded that the interim planner be authorized to sign the decision on behalf of the board. Discussion, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Declare the motion carried unanimously. Yes, I think that was entirely appropriate.
Okay.
Since Joe is technically not in an official position to sign these things anymore.
Just a point of order, Mr. Chair. I didn't actually vocalize my vote, but it was going to be an aye vote as well.
I heard him thinking, all right.
Yes, I heard the thought, right? Alrighty.
I wonder if we can just simply make some sort of a blanket statement that for the interim time, he's going to be the one signing or do we have to do that for each decision or each?
Well, the decision as drafted has Joe's name on it.
Oh, I see. Well, that's.
That would
fine.
be, at
Okay.
the very least, it would be appropriate to amend the decision as drafted to put Mr. Scanlon's name on there.
We basically just have planner certified.
Okay.
It's also just
Oh, yeah.
getting rid of those things.
It's on both case decisions, says Joe Biden. Okay.
Alrighty. Our next action item.
You're welcome.
Okay. Okay.
We have a draft decision for special permit site plan approval at 20 Milford Road for J. White's Automotive.
Thank you, Joe, for your help.
Good luck.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
Thanks.
And here, I should double check the zip code on 20 Milford Road. That might also be 60.
Yeah, I did look on GIS, but you know, we'll check and confirm with assessing on that because
Yeah.
it does there's a spot on Providence Road where it changes and then goes back to 01519.
Yeah.
But we'll check on that.
I think this part of Milford Road may be 60, but yes, that's something we can check. And
It's like 60, yeah.
Google
that's
Maps
very
says 60.
Okay.
It's which,
Google Maps
I'm
says
just
60.
up that street, so.
South Grove.
Yes. So are we making that change?
so I think we should make that change. And I would suggest that in finding F4, the second to the last line, I don't think it was the town planner who made the recommendation. It was
Oh.
probably the town planner.
Close.
Both my daughters are in construction shop at BVT, so I was thinking woodwork.
Are there any other questions, comments, suggested changes on this?
And I noticed that exhibit has a capital T right below it in F7B.
yes. I think that comes
Exit-
under the
exit
heading of
bit.
minor,
Yes, I don't remember if I noticed that in reviewing the draft. I didn't, when I was reviewing this, I didn't notice the town planner because the draft I reviewed, the word was "he recommended," and it was a question of, in my mind, of who he might be referring to.
Yep.
All right, we have 3 corrections that I'm aware of. 4 if you count the substitution of the interim town planner's name on the signature line there.
And just to draw to the board's attention, because I did get a call following our public hearing, because we did open and close on the same night, and I addressed it in condition 1. I did get a call from an abutter asking, how do we know in the future this use is not going to morph into something else? So that's why I got into specifics as far as
what the
C1 and C2. This is exactly what we're doing. The other things were really identified as ancillary to the principal use, and that any changes would require coming back to the board for modification. So did want to just address that. I did receive that verbal comment from one of the butters across the street and included it in the decision.
somewhere in there I noticed, I think this is the one where the name of the business was mentioned. I guess they'll have to get a modified special permit if they change the name.
At least get a determination. Get a determination whether it's
With those changes, I move that we approve the
Second.
decision.
All right, moved and second that the decision be approved as drafted with the changes noted. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Declare that motion carried unanimously.
Were there any bills?
Yeah, were there
I
any bills?
don't know. if
I
we
didn't
have.
see any circulated.
No, because the others crossed. Okay.
All right, we have,
Let's see.
let's
We
move on briefly to discussion items. I wanted to kick off the process of updating the subdivision rules and regulations. What's been distributed here was all the topics I could think of that might need to be addressed in any revision of the subdivision rules. These are for us to go away and think about and come back and discuss more next week. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on it tonight. I do want to make sure that, that we've at least listed everything that we might want to consider updating in the subdivision rules. Along with this, I did make one handout because in my review, I noticed that we have traffic study rules that are almost identical in the zoning bylaw and in the subdivision rules and regs. And this legal size document basically lays the two sets of rules out side by side, highlighting the few points of differences. Some of the differences are really not substantive. Some of them have to do with the nature of where they appear. Where the subdivision traffic rules talk strictly about subdivisions, where the zoning bylaw traffic rules talk about everything that's covered by the zoning bylaw, which would include subdivisions. And there's some differences of wording that are immaterial. There are a few differences that may be significant, and we want to think about how we want to deal with these essentially duplicate sets of rules. Ideally, I think the rules should need to appear only in one place, and if so, that would be the zoning bylaw, because they cover things besides subdivisions. But take a look through these and look at the differences. We'll see what, if we can identify any differences that might be significant that we have to think about, which number we use, that type of thing.
Yes. Just as a note, Mr. Chair, the next meeting that we have, I will be unable to be attending. I'm likely to draft up some notes on myself and submit them to Natalia to post on the website and to disseminate to the board.
Yep, that would work. This will take us a certain amount of time to really dig into and do some substantive work. I have a whole long list of little nits and stuff, and the list I've circulated here is only kind of a summary. I've got a lot more details written down, but I want to make my first objective here is to make sure that we've captured all the topics that we need to think about in taking a new look at the subdivision rules.
I had one question. So would the geological tests and studies part of any project be part of the subdivision rules, or is that something different?
That would really be part of this, one of the main things would be that if you did identify some sort of standards that have to do with development of land on steep slopes or adverse conditions, you could then say that the board may require, as part of a submission, a geotechnical report. My first thought would be that would be just covered by what the board could do requesting additional information. But if you wanted to get into more specifics, if they were going to live anyplace, they would be in the subdivision rules and regs. But I think you'd want to specify the exact conditions by which then that would be required. Sort of like how you have traffic coming in within subdivision rules, regs, and the bylaw at a number of units. You'd then also want to say for steep slopes or where drainage is built on those things. Because they could avoid the steep slopes. But here we had a situation where they were really putting their stormwater management system on that steep slope. That became an issue.
Yeah, and then there is, with some things of that nature, there is a question of whether that belongs in the subdivision rules or the zoning bylaw. The other, one of the fairly significant topics to be addressed, and we've identified this more than once in the last few months at least, is the stormwater rules. Because Grafton now has stormwater rules that basically are largely adopting the state's stormwater rules, but with some wrinkles for Grafton. And the Conservation Commission has jurisdiction over that for projects of a certain size and larger. But one of the things that we probably are going to want to end up doing is making sure that we are applying a consistent set of stormwater rules throughout. And there are some parts of, and this is more zoning bylaw, some parts of the zoning bylaw that refer to the DEP stormwater rules, but do not refer to the Grafton stormwater rules. So completely covering the stormwater rules is partly a topic for subdivision rules and partly a topic for zoning bylaw.
Yep.
And it's probably wise to get Graves involved and, take a comprehensive look at all of our zoning bylaw and subdivision rule references to stormwater to make sure that we've got everything treated consistently the way we want.
And Graves has already done the compare and contrast between the two. Leah Cameron and the Conservation, with the Conservation Commission. The next step would be meeting with Graves, Conservation, Leah, and the board just to say, how could we envision this working? So, for example, in another town that I worked in, when we developed a stormwater bylaw, planning board processes were exempt from receiving a stormwater permit that was issued through the engineering department for that town. So we retained anything that was site plan review, special permit, subdivisions that was the planning board. And then anything else, actually, if someone put in an addition, engineering could then issue a stormwater permit. So you can differentiate things. Here, conservation coming in at impacts greater than 40,000 square feet, you could retain that and funnel things through there. Or you could basically just reference the same standards, but the planning board is one that issues that stormwater permit. Because also think about some of the projects that may require site plan review. When we're dealing with site plan review, they may not even trigger stormwater or even conservation review. But our stormwater criteria right now references subdivision rules and regs. If we're playing from the same rule book, it really doesn't matter who. And we're using the same consultant. So it really becomes in some ways more of a political issue. What do you want to give to conservation? What do you want to keep for yourself? And where does the boards think of that? Drafting the regs, the standards is easy because it's in some ways it's already written. It's just what does the planning board have to change and what do you want to keep for yourself?
On the geotech thing, though, I think this may be the first time I remember it coming up, or at least for a very, very long time. And I think what Joe said is reasonable. A question was, or a concern was raised in this case. We responded by asking for more information. I hesitate to try to lock down a set of rules because the first thing that comes along will be outside, or someone will find a loophole or something. Better to maintain flexibility, at least until you really understand a range of what you're trying to handle.
Yeah, and you could basically guide the conversation. You can say, because I believe we already have language that says, avoiding steep slopes or things like that. And you could say, if development occurs in these areas, we may require X, Y, and Z to be done to put them on notice, to sort of start that conversation. But we know from that process and how seeing two geotechnical engineers debate it themselves. I'm not saying it was painful, but it was complicated, and I did not get a lot of it, and we needed a third party. So at least by identifying a general set, providing an applicant with guidance that if you do this, we may need to bring on these additional resources. And there should be other examples, maybe that other towns have that maybe do provide a little bit more guidance than what we have. But just to tie that in, as well as with what David had said about some things that we need to look at, I did provide Tim and Dave was copied on a recommendation that if we do have hours through CMRPC with DLTA, that may be getting some assistance in reviewing like the street separation, some of those things that the board have been grappling with a little bit more focused. That might be something it could work on over the spring and into the summer to maybe try to address. And CMRPC would probably be a good resource to try to look and see what is out there and do essentially a research project to try to provide the board some guidance.
Speaking of CMRPC, if you drilled all the way down in the correspondence this week, you saw the report on LPA hours. We get up to 24 a year, and
Maybe it was
apparently we
that
haven't
instead.
counted any of those.
Oh, he left. Maybe that was it instead. And did I copy you in the reply?
There's one in the correspondence packet.
Right. But I think I had gotten an email from Tim asking about using these 20 hours.
20.
And I think I had replied back, and I thought I copied you, David.
Yeah, you copied me.
But I'm trying to remember if it was DLTA or it was
Well,
the local planning assistance hours.
Whole different thing. But I don't totally agree with their accounting. We should have all 24 for sure. I may have to talk to someone up there about that. But it showed that we hadn't been charged for any hours. Anyway, that's another resource.
Yeah. Let me see. Yeah, what you responded to from Tim, was there was something from Trish Settles regarding, that was on the LPA.
Okay. Okay.
And your response was DLTA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was on my mind.
Now, the DLTA is a whole different thing, and right now is exactly when we want to be putting in, because the other committee I sit on is about to start looking at requests at our meeting this Thursday, real soon.
Real soon, so.
Yeah.
So if-
And that was in the, I think the dates were in the communique about that.
So if we want to make some requests, it would be to our advantage to get them in real soon now.
Yeah, that best done by talking to the folks up there about what would work.
Do you want me to make that contact with Trish and?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be helpful, I'm sure.
So Chair, so do we talk about this later as an input? All I'm trying to understand is if one of the points that I think it was Linda Hutchinson, she mentioned a point about the, whatever is the soil structure and the point of hitting the bedrock has, I paraphrase, that has an inherent risk of soil erosion. So I don't know if it's just from a high slope construction or construction at a high slope, or is that something we need to think about from a safety measure that, okay, if you're going to do in these various zones within subdivisions within Grafton, you would need to undergo, perform some kind of geotech test.
Right, we might want to, at the very least, have some discussion around that topic to determine how, if at all, we should be addressing that, or, let me put it this way too, whether there's something we ought to be considering putting into, or adding to, or changing in the subdivision regs and or the zoning bylaw to make sure that we have the leverage we need to, to identify that as a potential issue and to make sure that the engineering on that is covered where necessary. Sure. But yeah, that's, it's certainly something to put on our list of things to, consider. I mean, and my intent here was to try to list out all the
Right.
things that we might want to, that we ought to at least think about.
It's a to-do item.
I think we need a geotechnical advisor to advise us on what to.
Okay.
I had one other point. So,
Yes.
I know you guys, everyone is aware of it. When it comes to marijuana shops and pot facilities, do we talk about that and the guidelines to say that, is it a discussion point to talk about, should that be located not within 3 miles of a school or a place of worship or something of that?
It's already in it.
It's in the bylaw, the distance is in the bylaw, but it's nothing like 3 miles. You say 3 miles and we're in big trouble. We're prohibiting in the town, and we can't do that because we were a yes town.
Right, so there is some guidelines.
Oh, yes.
You
Yes.
read the bylaw?
Yeah, in the section 5.10 of the zoning bylaw, you will find the requirements as far as the limitations on placement of marijuana businesses of various kinds.
It's pretty strict.
Yeah, we spent a lot of energy
Yeah,
on that.
we did. Yeah, we spent a fair amount of time discussing that and deciding what to propose to go into the bylaw.
Changing our zoning bylaws is not strictly up to this board to decide. We make a recommendation to town meeting for the zoning
Yeah.
bylaws.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we just propose.
What we have is
Town
what we
size.
recommended.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to say that's probably enough for now because no one had this material in advance to review.
Right.
And my intention here was to begin the thought process around this. And so I think unless something is, and we'll plan on following up on this discussion at the next meeting. Between now and then, any thoughts you have, we'll have staff gather the thoughts and assemble the thoughts and circulate them for a discussion at the next meeting. Just as not that any of us need a reminder, but in between meetings, we don't discuss this as a board due to the open meeting law.
This is a very good starting point.
Yeah, I thought I'd try to put that together as a starting point for discussion, and that's where we're at. So, I think that's all on that. We don't have any bills to circulate. Actually,
We're up past,
seeing as how it's past 7:30, I think I would like to skip the remainder of the general business and get started with our public hearings. Our first public hearing is a continuation of the hearing on a request for special permit at 200 Westboro Road. This is for the cell tower on Tufts property. And if I'm not mistaken,
You're not.
we have a request for continuation of this hearing.
Oh, yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the request for continuation to grant the request for continuation until January 27th at 7:30 p.m.
Second.
Moved and seconded that the board grant the applicant's written request to continue this hearing to January 27th, 2020 at 7:30 p.m. By which time, if we're lucky, the balloon test will have been performed and the results distributed to us far enough ahead of time for us to review them.
I'm gonna be asking a question. I've looked at the RF report that we got. And the very next to the last item in their table of sites speaks of Nickerson Road as a planned site. Now, finding Nickerson Road is a little tricky, but Google Maps seems to think it's about 100 feet from, a couple hundred feet from the tower we're talking about now. I'd really like to know what that's all about. So,
Yeah, there it is.
Google Maps put it right about where the new horse hospital, the thing went.
I'm sorry. I mainly because I didn't look.
Google
at,
seems to know about it. I don't know whether, I
Yeah.
didn't look on the
Oh.
town.
It's on MapGeo there.
Yeah, I mean that's where I'm like, it's off of Nickerson in the
Nickerson
first
Road.
place.
Well, yeah. So, anyway, if they're planning on putting another tower in over there, I want to know about it.
Yeah, because
In the table, it does show 114 feet high, which, if my memory is
Well, it shows, there's a good chance that they're talking about the same thing, and it's a clerical error, but they have a different site number. That's MA 52 something.
yeah, because unless they're talking about as an alternatives analysis, putting it in as a separate
Well, okay.
tower.
Anyway,
Yeah. I do know that Dave Maxon is reviewing the report and all that. I think in an email, Natalia, he said he was almost done with it.
Well, he asked for copies of decisions. Which I
Oh,
sent.
that's right. Okay.
okay, so anyway,
Mr. Chairman, since this is a special permit and Justin won't be here at the next meeting, have you adopted the Mullen rule so that he could miss one meeting, one hearing?
Yes.
And still
we do
vote?
use it.
Yeah, we
Okay.
use it fairly
Okay, fine.
regularly.
Okay, Good.
and it is my intent to to watch the meeting and sign
good,
one of those.
okay. Just
But we're
checking.
still covered.
Yeah.
Thanks to our excellent cable TV operation, we have video recordings available of all of our meetings, and they're very easy for all of us to watch.
Great.
In the old days, they had to burn us a DVD so we could watch it. But
Yeah,
that's
but
no longer
just
true.
call it up on your web browser.
Yep.
YouTube is great.
You know, impeccable video.
Yep. Yeah, so- All right, is there any further discussion on the motion to grant the applicant's request for a continuance, whatever? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Declare the motion carried unanimously. We will come back to this one in a couple of weeks. Alrighty, we have our next public hearing, which is at the request for special permit for the two-family dwelling at 34 Elm Street. My recollection was that we held the hearing open so that we could receive written documentation regarding the ability of the applicant to do this on a non-conforming lot.
And I do see we did receive correspondence from Mr. Berger, our building inspector,
Yes.
regarding that very thing. Exhibit 11.
This is Elm Street. Yes. But, we also have gotten comments from Paul Cornier of the Sewer Department, Matt Pearson from the Water District, and information about the easement with, I was concerned, I think it was probably the sewer letter that talked about concerns. No, maybe it wasn't.
Yeah, Paul and I had mentioned a couple of changes that should be made.
Yeah, but that wasn't what I was catching.
I think you're referring to the water department stating that
Exhibit 10.
they wanted water access through the main frontage of the property, not through an easement.
Yeah, no, that wasn't, it was, there's lots of issues that aren't covered in our permit, something like that.
Exhibit 10, I believe you're thinking of, Bob.
Yeah, probably, well, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I do see many issues with a proposed plan that would not be subject to approval by us and would need to be changed or deleted. Specifically, water mains of this size in easements are not allowed by the district unless they are specifically for secondary backup supply or water quality issues. And so I don't think that base is covered, and I don't know what difference it makes to us.
That's one of the really main points. I'm just going to bring up the plan, and I'm sure the applicant can also speak to this. So they did change the footprint of the house, so they have moved that, and now there is a 25-foot utility easement. If the water line doesn't end up going in there, it doesn't have an impact on the rest of the project because the house is outside, and water service just looks like it's being stubbed onto the property and doesn't show it connecting through. So that might be something that the engineer for the applicant might be able to speak a little bit better to as relates to the changes that were made to the final plan that they submitted.
That seems to me to be, sound like a problem.
Right. Bill Hannigan, Hannigan Engineering, on behalf of the applicant. What we did was the previous plan had the water main coming up Elm Street and then turning over the property. And then we were connecting our two connections for the duplex into that. So that would be considered a main. So that was the issue that Matt had, was that he doesn't want the main in the easement. So what we did was we extended the water main a little further, which is now shown going past the house in front of it with a hydrant and a gate valve at the end in case the department ever decides they want to extend it further. So that will allow the flushing of the main. So the main itself is now still in Elm Street, but there would be a service connection for each of the two units for the duplex, so that they would be service connections, not part of a main.
But I thought the idea was to provide the water to
Eventually.
the project,
And that'll be a service connection as well. Because there's not gonna be any other user except for the user being the condominiums.
Well, okay, I don't know that it changes then for us about this, but, I note the issue here, that you might not be able to use it,
Well,
depending on how.
for this lot, it's immaterial.
Yeah, yeah.
We've sent the same plans, but with the other, with the information for the other side, over to them through a different channel for their review on that. So that's being reviewed separately.
But if they ended up, when you got ready to use that for your project behind, and they said no, or they said you had to do it some other way through there, then you'd be back here.
Nope, doesn't affect this project at all.
If you change what's on the plan we approved.
The service connections for the lot, for the building, have nothing to do with the main, the service connection for the lot going through it. There's an easement there. It's graded off. It meets all the slope criteria. What you're approving is what's on this plan.
Yeah, well, it's a difficult plan to read, quite frankly. But maybe Joe can point out the main.
That's the, if I'm reading this right, the, like,
Joe,
Fine.
lift it up a little bit, I'll point it out to him. So this right here is the main,
Yeah, yeah,
okay?
all
This
right,
is the service connection.
yeah, yeah,
This is the service connection, and this is the service connection.
yeah.
This is individual, it's one user. That's the difference between a service connection.
Yeah, well, he's talking about of size, the water mains of this size. I don't know.
Yeah, well, like I said, this was a main that went this way, so this was a main. There was no extension, and these two were connected over here.
Okay.
So the connections were inside the easement. Okay?
Right, so now,
I know.
right, so now the main is no,
main's only in the
there is
street.
no main in the easement, and there is no reason to think that a main will go through the easement.
The 8-inch connection to the other product will go through the easement.
Right, but that's a service connection.
That's a service connection, correct. No, so there'll be no other users connected to it except for the Prentice Place property.
So here, you can see what they had done is they had the line
Yeah, yeah,
on
I
the
know.
south side of Elm, and then it basically right angled, and the main continued in.
Yeah.
That's where now there's a distinction that they identified a service connection to go through that easement area, and the main to continue on out.
We've also widened out the easement by 10 feet.
Yep.
Yep.
So for the water, the service connections are all into the main in the street.
The
They're
services
now-
are
they're-
off the main,
There are now 3 service connections off that main.
correct.
and the expectation, just to be clear from my understanding as well, is that should the water district for some reason say, no, you can't put that service connection through the easement to the other condominiums, this plan would not change, the easement size would stay the same.
Yeah, because they wanted a 25-foot easement. Okay. I see Mr. Hassinger is still shaking his head, though.
Now, if with this change with the service connections all going out to the street, if that's, as far as we know, I mean, Matt's objection was specifically to a main in the easement.
Correct.
Now there is no main in the easement.
Correct.
Yeah, I guess you have to be a water department person to know the difference between a main and a service
Yes.
connection.
Right.
I understand a service connection to a house, but
It's a
I
larger
don't know
service
about one
connection
that
because-
serves whatever, however many, is 50 units or something?
40. So it's
Okay.
a larger service connection because they also have to have fire protection off of that.
But it's still
I
classified.
don't know how big, 8-inch service connection, I think of a service connection.
For whatever reason, the water district classifies that, what's now proposed, they classify it as a service connection, and it meets their standards for service connection.
It's one connection is what it is. Each connection is a service connection.
Yeah.
Now, just for this board, we're showing the same information on both this plan as well as the plan that we're in front of with the ZBA on. And when I sent out this email to Joe and to the ZBA, I copied both Paul and Matt on all correspondence, so they're fully aware of what we're doing.
And Paul's comments from the 20th of December, Have those been taken care of?
Well, what it is that Paul's comment was to take the manhole and eliminate the manholes on the site and just try to do a direct connection with the, and I'll point again. His comment was to eliminate this manhole, bring it down a little further and try to hit this sewer manhole directly. But you can't because you need to have 10 feet between the water and sewer.
Sewer, yeah.
And with the sewer coming through there, with the water coming through there, we'd be crossing it.
Yeah.
The elevations don't quite work. So going out to the
Yeah.
street makes sense.
Yeah, so Paul's comment has been addressed, at least in the sense that you
I
reviewed that.
And I replied to him with exactly what I have told you.
So Paul, so as far as you know, Paul is okay with,
He has not replied to my email, but that was middle of last week or so, but I've given him the same, the explanation is we can't put them that close together because of the regulations. So. But once again, that doesn't affect what we're trying to do. Because it's utility versus the actual building.
We would still continue with the manhole in the property.
Yeah, because that manhole is gonna also feed back to the other, development as well. And they don't have a prohibition against mains tying in.
yeah, no, I think it's not unusual to see, I've seen a number of them over the years, essentially cross-country sewer mains going, cross-country under easements.
So we shrunk the building a little bit. We changed on the notes for the plan, we changed the ratios relative to, building coverage, lot coverage, et cetera. Bob had called me with a couple of other questions, so we added information to the descriptions within the table relative to the required setback and the proposed setback. He had one corner of the patio in the back. He wanted that to be at least 10 feet off the property line. So we made that change. If you're facing the building, the left building has a kind of an angled patio area. So we made those changes as well. So this plan should be complete with all the department comments.
So should we close the hearing?
Yeah, I got nothing else.
Is there any comments from, it's a hearing, so.
Yep. Any other comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public on this project?
Would you like to wait for the consent of the water and sewer departments for this revised plan? Or make that a condition of approval?
Condition of approval. We don't want to delay it anymore than we
Okay.
have to.
No,
That makes sense to me.
on the assumption that what we will get from Paul Cronoya for sewer and Matt for water will be confirmation that,
Yeah,
With
if they accept this plan, they'll give us the permit to build, so.
yeah. Well, yeah, as far as water is concerned, you won't be able to do anything until, and that's sort of implicitly, and I think it's even explicitly.
We have to bring the main down just for these two units anyways, because the spaghetti net of lines are up and down that road.
Yeah, yeah, with every special permit, one of the conditions is that you must comply with all other local local, state and federal regulations, so we kind of cover the base of
Yeah, and
getting approval from water and
If you want
sewer.
to change anything, you gotta come back.
Yes,
And they're not gonna get occupancy without water anyway in the building.
yeah, no, there's, yeah,
As
we,
well as a few other things.
We won't even get the building permit without water available.
no.
Okay,
So we don't have to be super explicit about things like approval from sewer and water, because that's inherent in every special permit.
Okay.
move we close the public hearing.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we close the public hearing. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Declare the motion carried unanimously. And we now have a draft decision in front of us.
Just, there was one little nit, F6 and F7. In F6, we asked town council for input. In F7, we seem to be indicating we covered that by information from the building inspector, not from council.
That is because we were supposed to be getting a email confirmation from town council that she reviewed Bob's letter and concurred with its conclusions.
And
I'm assuming that we did not get anything at this time
Yeah,
explicitly from town council.
does she concur?
She does, but I asked for it in writing because the board asked for an opinion from council.
Can we do?
And the two of them did ask, the two of them did discuss when she was in last week for her hours. So we probably have to just follow up with her and Bob tomorrow, or they will have to follow up with her tomorrow to get that for the record.
Are we gonna be, if we go ahead with this tonight, are we gonna be able to do something to include it in the record?
Well, main thing would be adding it as an exhibit. The board can basically, as part of the motion, right after F17 to add reference to what would be Exhibit 15, stating that town council provided documentation concurring with the memorandum in Exhibit 11, and then condition the board's approval on making that change to the decision upon receiving that exhibit.
Okay.
So moved. Whatever you just said.
And what, did I hear a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded that the board approve this decision, approve the special permit and site plan approval, provided that written confirmation is received from town council and the decision is amended to reflect that. It would include adding an exhibit and a finding.
Right.
And as with the others, we would also be substituting Mr. Scanlon's name for the signature line here. And if you wanted to be really picky about that, the board could insist that the chair or some other person delegated by the board review the final
The
decision.
chair. That was part of my motion.
Yes, I was going to suggest that as well.
That can be arranged. So having said all that, Natalie, you got that motion down word for word?
Sure she does. But she has it available tomorrow on the internet.
Yes. All right, is there any further discussion of the motion on the decision?
I had a question. Was there going to be a condition, something added in the condition, or I thought I heard
Now,
that?
when we were talking about water and sewer, I pointed out that somewhere,
We're waiting for someone to hear someone.
oh, right,
Well, that-
waiting for the town council thing, that's not, there's no condition required. What we want to do is get that added to the record and included in a finding, and I think that
That's the
covers,
town council thing.
the town council
Yeah,
thing.
for the,
No, I think you had sent an email, and that was the point we said. He was waiting for the response from.
Oh, for the
water
response from the water
department.
district.
Yeah, I thought
Yeah,
that was
and I
one of
think-
the conditions.
Yeah, we did, yeah, that, the possibility was raised, and I suggested that this, as we typically do, in fact, now that I look at the conditions,
seem to have it.
there actually is not a condition which we frequently, but apparently not always include in our decisions, which says that it's let's see if there's another one that we can.
So it's really not recommended to have a general condition saying that this approval is only valid if everyone else issues an approval. Because there can be certain things that maybe are approved by way of a condition by another board that they need to verify. If you are looking for verification that this latest plan has addressed water department's comments, then you need to build in that condition stating that prior to any commencement of work, the applicant shall provide verification to the board that this latest plan is approved by the water department, or realistically, because of the fact that by referencing the plan, if all of a sudden they had to redo the plan to accommodate water, they have to come back to modify. So any modification in C8, any modification to the use or the site as described, and then it brings that you can get that feedback from those departments.
And that's probably, to keep things as simple as possible, that's probably the way to approach it, is to just, because we can approve a special permit, but the applicant still needs other approvals from other agencies in order to proceed.
Yes.
And so in that sense, it's sort of implicit in the whole process that the special permit is only one of several approvals that are needed. And as Joe just pointed out, it is also true that if a subsequent approval by another agency requires a change in the plan, that has to be brought to our attention. So if the water district forces a change to be made on the plans, that has to come back to us by the condition that's already there.
So you don't need any change in my motion, is that right?
Right, I would
Right.
say that's a fair statement.
Yeah.
I often say, I like to keep things make things as simple as possible, but no simpler.
Yes.
You can oversimplify, and that's not good, but
Yeah. So
to that, I don't want to add that particular complexity if we don't have to.
yeah, and the reason is that let's say we had a condition that said this is only valid if you receive approval from other boards. Being a special permit, they can appeal that approval. What happens if 20 days go by, they don't appeal, gets recorded, they have to go to conservation or another board that denies them? Does that invalidate the special permit? Are you then taking enforcement action saying, well, now this special permit is invalid? That may be a condition that the applicant had there been opportunity to resolve, could have. Very likely it would require a modification of the special permit, but it comes a question of the validity of that special permit. That's why in all my trainings it had been anything where you're conditioning the validity of your approval on someone else's granting approval, you can't. You can say you need to comply with all local regs. That's easy because that's general. Because if you don't,
That-
you're not getting.
Yeah, and that wording, you need to comply with all the other things I've seen us include in some previous permits, but not consistently. And quite honestly, that kind of goes without saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, even if we didn't tell you you had to comply with all of the local regs, you'd still have to.
It's sort of a condition. It's
I don't know, that appeared a long time ago in our decisions. I guess to remove any doubt that we were approving all those things and the other people didn't have to, or they didn't have to get approvals from somebody else. Just to avoid that, I guess, to avoid having that question be able to come up. So anyway, I think there's a
All right.
motion on the floor.
There is a
Mr.
motion
Chairman.
on the floor. Is there any further discussion of said motion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Declare the motion carried unanimously. The decision will be revised as discussed, and the chair will review it for consistency with the board's intent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, we have one more public hearing, another continuation. This is for the modification of the special permit at 8 Millennium Drive, commonly known as Nature's Remedy.
Now, what were we waiting for? I don't remember.
Oh, we were looking for documentation, some sort of documentation about, to back up why
Yes,
they
right.
needed an extension.
Right.
Oh, yes.
Right. The
Oh,
question-
yes.
Right. The question that we raised at the time in the last hearing was, given the fact that the permit technically had expired sometime back in September, there was a question of whether the board should entertain the extension request that was to be addressed by finding documentation to show that the applicant had been working on things and had not just completely abandoned the project. And I think we received, I was looked at it a few days ago, I think we received one or two documents, emails or whatever, that detailed what the applicant had been doing in the interim, including, among other things, getting a host community agreement for the new proposed use.
I think there need to be a few words in the decision saying, sort of, the board finds this as a special case that, because of whatever all, the failure to meet the deadline will be.
Yes, I think, if the
And our
board,
extension will date from the September, whatever.
yeah, provided the board is, absolutely, if the board accepts the documentary evidence to show, what, for lack of a better term, I'll call a good faith effort on the part of the applicant to continue pursuing the project, we're willing to grant an extension on that basis, and the decision certainly ought to reflect that specifically.
I'm willing to do that as long as the decision reflects that.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, and Joe, you and I discussed last week another question that comes up regarding the fact that the applicant is now proposing essentially a different use. The existing special permit was for a medical marijuana cultivation, processing, and retail operation. And the new proposed use is an adult use marijuana cultivation and processing without retail, correct?
Correct.
So one of the things in the original decision, we had, and this was before we adopted our own marijuana establishment bylaw, went through that public process. When you look at the original decision from back in 2017, which is then before we started dealing with all this, a lot of our conversation had to deal with what happens if it was like the retail adult, all of that. One of the things that our decision really didn't address at all is all of a sudden whether or not the cultivation, processing, and manufacturing, if that had spun to be adult. So the application that is currently in front of the board is just to not only do the extension, but then also to ask for a modification of this decision to allow for that use. However, it raises the question whether or not that means that the planning board itself, in evaluating that, also needs, because now we have that bylaw, that adult cultivation manufacturing is allowed by way of a special permit. Yes, we'd be modifying the original special permit, but we'd also have those submittal requirements as being needed for that. So the cultivation and manufacturing. If we never issued this approval back in 2017, they'd be coming in with a site plan, all of that, as well as the documents that are identified in 5.10. And there's 5 of them that deal with the adult marijuana. I raised to Dave that, and I did talk to Bob Carr as well, that because the bylaw is already on the books, that we would have to follow that application process for that material to be reviewed by the board to satisfy that it actually does comply with the bylaw. That we can handle things 2 ways. One, just to consider, or 3 ways really. One, just to consider the extension and be over with it, and then have Nature's Remedy come back for a modification, submit the material that the bylaw calls for the adult cultivation and manufacturing. A second option is basically to keep the hearing open, allowing Nature's Remedy to submit that material so that the board can make findings under 5.10. It's not all that complicated. A lot of this work you probably already had to start doing for the CCC anyways.
We do, and some of it was as a consequence of our original approval. The traffic plan is on there, the site plan showing fencing, some lighting, some of that stuff we already
Yeah,
have.
so what we're mainly talking about here is additional material that needs to be developed and reviewed.
Right, and it's not a huge heavy lift. It's not like we're asking for geotechnical reports.
Let's keep those geotechnical.
Well, I don't know.
Unfortunately, I'm going to try that like in Littleton, and it's just going to be like just no reaction. I think Grafton's the only one that I'll be able to use a geotechnical when people actually get it. But the third one, which would not be necessary because they could proceed under their existing development plan that's referenced in this decision from 2017, is that in their last extension, Nature's Remedy had said, well, we do want to make some changes to the building. Site pretty much will stay the same, but rather than having one story, we may go to 2-story. If that was something that was right around the corner, I'd say, well, why don't you merge the changes to the building and the adult use and bring it all together. That it sounds like it's not at that point. And Mr. Carr would like to just proceed with the extension as well as if the board needs a continuance to consider the additional material just to sort of flesh out the ability to make findings per the bylaw. That's what at least we had a conversation last week as far as those next steps, and I summarized that with David as well.
Just one thing, I don't remember whether we referenced medical sales in the original, retail sales in the original approval. I know we at least discussed that adding adult would, if it came, it was before adult was here, then we'd be back talking about that. But if, should we be undoing the medical sales, retail sales part if we have it? Or can we?
Well, I think that becomes something that just to clarify, from the applicant, whether or not that would be continuing under this, because condition 2, special permit authorizes uses associated with a registered marijuana dispensary. That definition includes the retail component. If it is truly becoming more of a cultivation, processing, and manufacturing, then the decision should ideally reflect that. Right now, the request for adding the adult cultivation and manufacturing is basically just saying that's allowed on the site. Nothing else is really changing as far as the use inside.
I don't know, I guess the CCC is still keeping the old RMF rules for now, so that what we permitted would include sales.
No, the regulations actually have been modified a couple times over. So with regards to
Whether, how to sort this out so that we're not saying sales are allowed, retail sales are allowed. Because I think Joe's saying, because we approved RMF at that time included medical sales.
Mhm.
So it would still,
Yeah.
I'm
I do have a tangent question, probably for Joe, maybe Bill even knows, is that where our town council said that our town's limit of recreational sales for marijuana it stops at our approvals at here, and we have two. So where that, as drafted right now, does say they have sales, when we approve, if we approve, the extension and, the change without removing that, does that mean that we're at two?
That's not, you're saying the approval is what he was saying about RMF,
Yeah,
because sales of medical are included or were included in RMF.
yeah.
But
I don't
the limit of two is under the new laws about adult use.
Right, so it does not include
and
medical.
You can have, and I don't have a real good handle on this. Anybody who has medical can get an approval regardless kind of thing. Or anybody who wants medical sales can, I don't know, I see it in the newspapers, but I don't quite, again, because it keeps
Right.
moving.
You would still need a community host agreement even for medical.
Yeah, but that comes down the hall, not here. Actually.
Right, but I'm just
suppose it
saying,
comes here,
it's, I wouldn't be allowed to, even if you approved me for medical, I can't do it because I don't have a community host agreement, and that's what the state is looking for. That's the way they police this.
But you could go get one from the selectmen. And then,
That's-
then where would you be?
Yeah, my comment came down to the idea of, other marijuana establishments that would want to come into the town where we have that limit. And town council said that when we, approve a special permit, that falls under the number of limits we can, approve.
Actually, that's not.
That's what
I don't think that's
not
what
the way
she
it fell
said.
out.
That,
My,
that was my understanding. I apologize then.
there was, we had questions around exactly
Yes.
when and how that limit of two applies. And the final conclusion that I remember on that was that when the applicant files with the CCC is going to ask the town whether they comply with all local bylaws. And it's at that point, if we have two retail sales that have reached that point, and a third one comes in, we are in a position to say, no, they don't comply because we have a limit of two.
Yeah, the comes in is the CCC coming back asking
Yes.
the town at that point in the process. Does that sound right to you?
Well, I guess is the crux of this is that you don't want to all of a sudden see medical go in there without it being approved by the board. Not that we
Right,
don't.
well, yeah,
Can we just exclude it in the decision?
Well, that was sort of like what I think I asked.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think the idea there would be if there is currently no intent to engage in retail sales,
Then that
it's
is
my
correct.
understanding
That
that
is
your
correct, yes.
plan currently is cultivation and processing, but not retail sales. Then you would want to modify that original special permit to remove the retail sale.
And the challenge is how to do that.
And how to do
with
that.
a reference to RMF, or whether, I don't know whether for the medicals, for growing medical, you need the RMF approval, or whether the one for adult is, or, what you're doing.
I have an idea, and that is if we continue the meeting to our next meeting, I'll come represented with somebody that knows all the legal ramifications and how this all works. He'll be an attorney, and he'll fix everything that I've screwed up.
I think
And I
that'd be-
apologize that I have put the board through this.
Again, we're someplace near the leading edge of, we were one of the very first towns to
You
put
were,
in
right, yeah.
the recreational at all, and we seem to keep being.
We are breaking new ground with this particular process, dealing with an approved but not constructed medical marijuana operation, now modifying that to be, or to include adult use, but to not include one of the medical uses that was originally approved. And with all that's changed in the legal environment between our local bylaws and the state laws, and all that's changed since 2017.
Yeah.
Yes, it would be helpful. I think I'm getting the impression that the board is quite comfortable with granting the extension and with the proposed change in use. We're looking to, it's kind of a process question. How do we accomplish that in a way that actually accomplishes what you want, right?
And whether to do that try to do that in one step, or whether to
Yeah.
grant the, extension, close the hearing, and then have a process.
And then work on another, basically just, come back with another modification request and deal with the two issues separately. But if we can reach some resolution on the modification of use in 2 weeks, then that kind of says that, keeping it simple, we'll do it all in one shot.
So you would not close the hearing tonight?
That would be, I think that would be appropriate. If we are going to try to find a way to work the change in use into this, then I think that requires some additional information to get on the record. So that would certainly say keeping the hearing open would be the thing to do, if that's the approach we want to take.
Sure, that works for me, if that's.
And if you're comfortable with that, and I'm, like I say, I'm comfortable with the notion that the board is okay with the extension as opposed to declaring this to be all gone and having to start over.
Yeah.
Okay, I do have a question that's separate from that. We're done with that.
All right, so I think, are we all set that we know the way forward here, that we will continue this hearing? You'll come back in 2 weeks with some legal firepower that will, some legal expertise that will
find our way through this.
help
Yes.
us navigate our way through this
Will do.
mess.
Okay.
Now, I just have one question. We were
Just one.
handed some material, which I suppose needs to go on the record.
If it's regarding this application, then yes.
Do you want
I don't know whether it is or not. Yes, it is. Or at least the page I've got here is.
Yes.
He quotes,
I'll share my copy with the.
I gave it to him. Justin, I already did it.
he quotes a report by Lisa Redmond in the Grafton News, and it talks. The part that I'm curious about is talking about money, and see, Nature's Remedy will make a $50,000 payment. This is, I guess, present in your presentation to the selectmen. Make a $50,000 payment to Grafton after the first sale, and then $25 per pound of marijuana that leaves the building. In addition, Mr. Carr estimates the town will see revenues of $500,000 per year, and the company will make a $10,000 donation. I was just interested in the $500,000 figure. Is that an accurate report? And is that really a realistic number?
Yeah, if we're pumping on all cylinders and all things equal, yes, and those numbers actually come out of our host community agreement. That's actually an agreement.
Yeah.
Those aren't.
Well, but I don't know that the host agreement necessarily tells us how much, well, we're gonna get $500,000 a year.
Well, right. It all depends on the climate.
Sure.
Right now, I mean, we were just approved in Worcester for a dispensary. I just came from there to here. And we're looking forward to having, our cultivation here supply Worcester, as well as the handful of other, people in Worcester that only have stores only, that they don't have, retail or cultivation locations in. So it all depends if all of a sudden, more cultivations go up around us, but yes, it is realistic.
How long would that fairly large number continue to be the case? How many years?
That's really hard to tell saturation. I mean, if you compare us to Colorado.
Some of the things they talk about, this only applies for the first 5 years or something like that. Is that, whatever, is that the $25 a pound and you keep paying that forever?
Yep. Nope. I think the agreement either ends in 5 or 7 years, and then we renegotiate the agreement.
Okay, but it doesn't, the $25 doesn't go away?
No.
Unless you reach different terms. There's a lot of interest in town just now about the potential for an override vote in May of $1 million. And so people are really interested in town revenues.
The potential revenue sources.
Potential
yes.
revenue sources. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And how soon are you gonna be open?
There's so many moving parts. Yeah, it's hard to tell, but, you know, between, I think Grafton was our first location that you guys gave us, the approval, and, you know, back some 3 years ago, it was contentious, I can tell you back then, it was a swing vote in the selectmen, but, it was great, and we haven't forgotten that, and we'd like to come back here, and we feel like we'd be fulfilling a promise that we made to you some 3 years ago. We'd like to.
Yeah, well, I don't want to have to grant another extension. In other words, I want you to be in the ground, getting into the ground this year, this summer.
But again, we need to make application with the CCC to do what we want to do, and it's, you know, whether they take, I don't know. But you know what, we're getting pretty good at this ourselves, so.
There are some things over which you don't have any control.
Exactly, so,
Not
but
really
happy to always.
anybody, including the CCC.
That's all another question, isn't it?
The retail shop on 146 is the same nature as Remedy?
Yes, that's us.
Oh, okay. That's only retail, is it? Or
Yes, it's adult use retail only.
okay.
Yep.
I move that we grant the applicant's written request to
I
continue.
had a question.
Sorry, go ahead.
So, I know this is just quoted from whatever was the original agreement. This 500,000 estimate, is that just based on cultivation or the marijuana retail sale also for a medical marijuana sale?
No,
There's no
it's
sale there. There's no sale there.
Medical marijuana?
No.
nope, it's adult use only. That leaves the building. Every pound that leaves the building, that's the fee that we pay. So we'll be sending product to our own dispensaries. That's $25 a pound, and we'll be wholesaling to other retailers, and that will be $25 a pound. Anything that leaves the building,
Okay.
Gets
And when you
taxed.
say medical marijuana, there was no retail?
There's no sale.
Okay.
So there cannot be any sale at this facility, right?
There'll be
Like
no
individual
sales at this
sale.
No retail sales,
Retail.
only wholesale.
yes,
Oh, okay, okay.
right.
Or, once
Thank
we
you.
sort all this out, we'll only
No
have
direct-to-consumer sales.
Yes,
retail.
right,
Yes.
exactly.
I don't think you can wholesale to,
Two individuals.
No.
All right. So we'll see you in 2 weeks. Is that?
So
As I was-
a written request to continue to January 27th would be in order here, and I think
and
Natalia
I
has
thought
the
there started
paperwork.
to be a motion there.
Yes, there was
Yes.
a start to a
Is there
motion.
any further, anything else from the board? I will recognize the motion to
Do you
grant
have a
the
second?
applicant's written request to continue the hearing to
Second.
January 27th. Moved and seconded. Discussion of that motion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Declare the motion carried unanimously. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all.
Good luck.
We'll look forward to getting this all figured out in 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
All righty.
Thank you.
And back to our general business. Do we have anything by way of a staff report from either our former or our new current staff?
Well, I'll at least kick things off for the steaming pile that I left on the desk on Friday. Suffice to say, I closed out town hall. I was the last one to leave on Friday. Just trying to get things in order because, as Tim said, not only is the department busy, but the town as a whole is busy. Leading up to when I left was finalizing details with John Allen. On Thursday is the public workshop for the Grafton Gateway project at the Great Hall at 1 Grafton Common. So we were working on logistics, some of the materials, and the format in preparation for that. You may have seen on Facebook that we had our first site walk for the Grafton State Hospital redevelopment. I did not post pictures that I took inside, but it's really interesting in a Chernobyl-esque type way. The amount of physical people that was attending, I think, it definitely was less than the number of people that have expressed interest in the RFP. First full week of January, I can understand some people not getting there, and we have additional opportunities for a pre-bidders conference. That's going to be February 6th, and then the following week is another site walk. We've already had inquiries as far as special individual site walks, which everything gets coordinated through the town administrator's office. So it was actually a really great day for that walk. Other things that are going on, and at least I communicated it to Leah as well as to David, with the open space plan. Unfortunately, CMRPC had some staff turnover, and one of the staff who was picking up the pieces to take it over the finish line had also left. They're going to pick that back up the end of the month to try to take across the finish line as soon as possible. So that's that. Hopefully, will then be it and not require really much effort on the part of the committee or Leah, since all the comments were already provided. I did ask, and I'll have to just leave that for Bill to follow up with CMRPC. Did provide CMRPC with what a consensus was for the action map. So that would be something that at least the group would have to take a look at. There is the historic inventory project that's going on, and all of these verbally reviewed with Bill, and I'm finishing up a spreadsheet that is becoming a very lengthy spreadsheet. As far as current projects, that one is basically on cruise control with Mass Historic and the consultant and Historical Commission, and the department just has to sort of maintain communication and process invoices. Trying to think, as far as we were at least tonight successfully able to get through that monster submission of all those applications. So trust Bill and Natalia to finish up and work with Dave on that last decision. And that's basically it. I know that Tim wants someone on full time as soon as possible. So, trust that that's moving forward, and that's basically it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if...
Pre-disaster mitigation, I saw signed contract for that.
Yep. So on, we had received funding through MEMA for revising the town's hazard mitigation plan. So probably some of that paperwork's coming in. Also, MassWorks is continuing. Hopefully they'll be done soon. We've started to have some construction meetings with the developer of Afonso as far as identifying, because spring will be here soon, as far as doing final paving on the road. And actually, one of the last things I was doing was sort of doing a initial staff review of a partial submission for the mixed-use project for Dominic Afonso at 100 Institute Road. So that's what we rezoned village mixed use. He's provided a draft site plan as well as architecturals. I had gone through, identified other things he needed to do to revise the plan to come in and meet criteria in the zoning bylaw. They originally wanted to submit on Wednesday, but I think the lengthy memo is probably more than what they could get done in a couple days to submit by Wednesday. But that is something that the board is going to be seeing sooner versus later. One of the things while we were talking about extensions, I did take an opportunity to go through back when we had Ann and Rachel and a little bit more bandwidth on my part. We kept track of some of these deadlines a little bit closer. There is one additional deadline that did just expire, and I reached out to Gristmill Village. They're actually probably in the fall gonna be doing all the final coat of paving. They're building out the last 3 lots, but technically, for 2 years, they did not have a, construction extension. So let them know, should at least submit, give the board an update. The board, did receive application for Bull Meadow. That, when we approved the modification of the water line coming out, at that point, we probably should have had the conversation as far as deadline, but we didn't. So the deadline is from the original approval, which was then expired the end of October. They submitted and they signed a PNS with the developer to purchase that project. So probably beginning of February, you're going to see them coming in as well. Did give me an opportunity to then put together advance notice for the BP gas station, April 15th, perfect day for them. That their extension, so I was already communicated with their attorney, that they need to make sure that they're on top of it. I did hear from them that he had reached out to the project manager, who then is reaching out to all their program people to try to identify and give us an idea as far as when that gas station is programmed. They had, as when they were in last year, they had said we had other projects that sort of came up above this. This is in the pipeline. And every 3 months I would reach out to them saying, where exactly are we in this pipeline?
It's
And what do they keep saying?
We'll
We're
get
in the
back to you.
pipeline.
Yeah, it's rather clogged.
Every time I drive by there, there's still a sign in the window that says for rent,
I know.
or lease, or whatever.
But at least they did take down the clothes donation
Yes.
boxes.
Yes.
Yes.
They did that.
So, get a win where you can. Actually, come August, the DPW, if they haven't completed their project, would have to come in. But I don't think you'll be like cashing in a bond to finish it for them on that project. Library is next year, though,
Yes.
in 2021. So at least going through, trying to clean up, gave me a good chance to identify some of these administrative things that sort of got dropped as we were working on some of those other projects.
Curious about the library. There was a press release or, a story, delay or raised costs because of finding unsuitable material. Curious about that.
That part, maybe representatives of the building committee might be able to
I'm
answer.
not on it.
I was there in the meeting, so.
Oh, okay, that's right, you were. I don't recall the exact details outside of reading the same article. But
Well, it was always a 21E concern there, and there were not well-known terms in the transfer to the town about, they did a lot of going around about that. I'm just wondering if something.
I thought this had to do with the library parcel itself, a underground tank that they weren't quite, they knew of back 15 years ago, but then there were certain decisions that were or weren't made. Now they have to take care of that. I thought that's what the unsuitable material was in connection with.
That sounds about right. That was what was discussed in the last meeting, and
I noticed in some of the pictures that have been put online, there looks like something like an ancient bit of foundation that goes down deeper. The lot is more or less level with the floor of the basement of the building, but then this looks like it's down below that, back from the stack box area.
Wow.
I'm wondering,
I hadn't seen those.
yeah, well, I may not. I look at the pictures on my phone, so it's a little, it's not exactly high def. Hope they get going. What was it? There was something. You're lucky I forgot. I can't think what it was.
Anything else we need to discuss with staff report topic? If not, was there anything in correspondence other than the LPA that we already briefly discussed? Anything we need to bring to our collective attention?
Nothing that I noticed for me.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything.
Any reports from planning board representatives and town committee and CMRPC on the topic that's not yet been discussed?
And I know we talked about the DLTA and whatnot.
LPA, yeah.
As far as the CPC goes, I know we have a January meeting coming up, but I did notice the town posted a notice about submitting for proposals in case someone's watching here that would want to do a proposal for affordable housing or any other covered CPC activity.
Joe has already mentioned anything to do with the Open Space and Recreation Plan Committee. I have nothing to add to that.
And I have an update from the library building committee. One key thing that stood out was because of the whatever expense, additional change requests with all this digging through the earth. I round up the number. I think we have already eaten up, or we are going to eat up 30% of the contingency with this as of now. With my construction background, I do feel that you hit most of these contingencies when you are digging the earth. Once you get in the superstructure, you are in much more stable space unless something crashes down, and then you have other liabilities coming in. So, but that should stand out that, okay, if we have hit 30% contingency. If this is the trend that it continues, we don't know where it would land, but that is part of the uncertainty.
That's why we have a contingency built into most projects.
I think I remember a similar mention for the DPW, where people were talking about the bulk of the contingencies tend to be before you get, you tend to be past the really serious stuff when you get out of the ground.
Yeah, the thing is, unless you have X-ray vision, you don't really know what's under the surface. So it's when you start digging that you tend to find the things that you didn't know were there.
What's wrong with ground penetrating radar?
Not quite as good as X-ray vision, I guess.
No, but better than looking at it from the surface and guessing.
Yeah.
Or even looking at old records that may or may not tell you anything.
Yeah.
Which I think they do for 21E, don't they? Okay, well.
All right. Are there any other items which may lawfully come before the board?
Move we adjourn.
Second.
Moving to second that we adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So the motion carried unanimously.